We just get on the phone or get on a Zoom call, or we meet them in person and we just record a 1-hour video conversation about their lives. And I've had it where people will come back after that video and say, that was such a great experience. It made me remember XYZ organization, and I want to give them a gift.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Cecilia Amo. I'm really excited to talk about her experience as an estate planning attorney and really trying to center young families in the conversation with thoughts and ideas about how to hold generational wealth for the first time, as well as legacy giving. There's so much for us to talk about today. Let's start with Cecilia, you just giving a little background on who you are, what brings you to our conversation, and then we'll dive in.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mallory. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about how important all of this is. So as you mentioned, yes, I am an estate planning attorney. My approach to estate planning is heart-centered, relationship-based, and counseling-focused. So I do things a little bit differently. Yeah.
Okay, can we just dive right in there? What does that mean? You do things differently. How are things typically done in this world that don't feel aligned with how you build partnerships and relationships and help folks steward, their engagements in this way? And then let's go from there.
Okay. I would say that the typical experience someone has with an estate planning attorney, if they even choose to go with an attorney, because there are a lot of, I would say, unauthorized practice of law type deals going on with notaries who are doing plans for $7.95 or whatnot. But the typical experience is that they'll go into an office, meet with an attorney for maybe 20, 30 minutes, give all their information, and that attorney will talk at them and tell them what they need and basically put them in a bucket of, because law school teaches us to issue spot and solve fact patterns instead of connect with actual people and figure out where they're coming from. So after that, they're passed off to maybe a paralegal. They sign some documents they don't understand. They put it on a shelf and they never hear from that attorney again. And unfortunately, as a result of this one-size-fits-all document mill type planning, there are a lot of gaps that leave families vulnerable. It doesn't help them build generational wealth. And particularly young families with minor children, they receive very little to cover the gaps that could lead to their children either being taken into foster care or taken into custody by someone that they would never want raising their children.
And so talk to me a little bit about your process, like how you build partnerships with these families and what it takes to do it in the way that you do.
Okay. So I'm actually part of a consortium of attorneys called the Personal Family Lawyer Attorneys. And it's not that we are all under the same firm. We're just attorneys who have all committed to the Personal Family Lawyer or PFL promise, which is to give our community, give our clients the legal guidance that they need, the legal guidance that they want, the legal protections that they need in a relationship they can trust. Mm-hmm. So we all do things, there are certain things that we do, protecting children through planning is one of them, because our mentor who trained us, her name is Allie Katz, and she wrote one of the best-selling books on estate planning for young families. It's called Wear Clean Underwear, because when you're young, your mom's always like, wear clean underwear in case something happens. But estate planning is like the adult version of that, right?
I love that.
So it was her vision to train attorneys and build a network of attorneys who would do estate planning in a better way that was more in service to the community, to help families and protect children. So, there's actually something called the Kids Protection Plan that we are all trained and licensed to do. And there are about 500 of us nationwide and maybe 40 or 50 in California. So there are a lot of PFLs out there. They're all wonderful, heart-centered attorneys who really care.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about how these things are interrelated. This piece around estate planning, the protection of children, generational wealth, like there are a lot of assumptions I could easily make about this, but tell me about how not having this type of protection, conversation, advocate, essentially, ultimately creates the perpetuation of systemic issues generation after generation after generation.
Yes.
Talk me through that a little
Yes. Oh my goodness. I could talk all day about this.
bit.
Estate planning is not the first thing you think of when you think about equity, but it really, I mean, it's crazy, how deep and meaningful a good estate plan can be for a family. So in California, if you own real property or if your assets are over a certain amount, and there's no estate plan, it goes through the probate court process. The probate court process is awful, as most government things are. Default plans go. It costs families about 5% of the gross market value of their estate. So imagine the average house in California is worth $800,000 maybe. And so that means probate is going to run around $40,000 in California for a family. And imagine what a family could do with that money if they didn't have to use that just to transfer ownership of assets between generations. So that's one piece of it. Another thing is statistically, 90% of family wealth is gone by the third generation. Statistically, the average inheritance is spent in just 5 short years. And statistically, a third of people who receive an inheritance are in debt within 2 years. And all these statistics exist because either there's a lack of estate planning, or if there is a plan, it might be, a one-size-fits-all plan that's not built with the kind of guidance and protection that would create generational wealth and preserve that inheritance beyond 5 years.
Wow. So what is I have all my own limiting beliefs around estate planning and inheritances. And, my husband and I just went through our first process of this because we have kids now, and we wanted to make sure that while we don't have a tremendous amount of assets, there was so much in there about like end of life wishes and just, protecting things like that. And I mean, I felt a tremendous amount of stress going into the process, feeling like it was this black box of information that I'd never be able to fully wrap my head around, and sort of like the trust it took with our lawyer and the patients and it was so easy at times to just be like, okay, well, my husband's so much better than me at this. But like for me to just be like, okay, well, just tell us what's best, because I don't even know how to make the decision that you're putting in front of me, which as you're talking, I can imagine is just such a common experience for people because it's such an overwhelming process. And so I'm just curious, like on the human side of this, like, how do people find out about lawyers like you or folks who are inside this network like you are? And what are some like entry points for them or invitations for them to feel like this is going to feel different if you've done this before or started this process before and perhaps felt really alienated by it? Like there's actually a different way to walk through this. What's your approach to folks maybe who are feeling resistance around it, I guess?
I try to educate the community, through social media, through being at community events, through having workshops and webinars and things like that. I should probably rewind a little bit too, and I'm dating myself because I use the word rewind and the young kids don't use that anymore. Well, let's back up a bit to my process because I told you what the typical experience was, but I didn't actually go through what my process looks like and what makes me so different. So my process starts with a 1 to 2 hour legacy planning session where we just do a deep dive about the law. I educate people so they have the context to make these decisions. And then we talk about their assets, what would actually go to probate? What would the cost be for their family specifically? Are there any tax issues? What other issues are coming up? Do the parents agree on who should take custody of the children if something should happen? Who are the emergency responders? Who would you want to take immediate custody of your children because maybe the guardians live further away? When I mentioned gaps that exist when it comes to minor children. Most estate plans will only name guardians in a will, and a will only works if you've died. So if you're in an accident and you're in the hospital in a coma for 3 months, that will has no effect, and there's nothing legally stating who should take custody of your children. So those standalone documents are very important. Temporary guardian authorizations for emergency responders, having a medical power of attorney. So if you're ever traveling, there's someone who you trust who is there who can make important medical decisions on your behalf. There's just so much that goes into it. And talking to parents about all these, is there someone who you would never want raising your children, who might step up in the event of an accident? That's something that can come up, especially, and, talking about equity. What if you have a family with a child who is trans, and they have a very conservative extended family, and then something happens to them, and conservative grandma or conservative sister puts in a petition to get custody, and on paper, auntie has money, she has a stable family, she looks great. The judge has no idea what her value system is. So it should be the parents making these decisions, not judges.
Okay. Can we go deeper into the equity side of things here? Because I have a feeling there are a lot of intersections around issues of equity with estate planning and legacy giving that I can't even fathom. So can you talk us through, from an equity lens, what are the primary elements you're looking out for?
Yes. So most people assume that trusts are only for the wealthy. And I think the statistic is 50% of people think trusts are only for rich people. But as I mentioned, if you have a modest sum, a more modest sum that you want to leave to your children, you wouldn't want that spent in just 5 years, right? You'd want that to grow and build. And, the families that are not planning for that to happen, the non-white families, of course, the families with generational wealth, they've been doing this obviously for generations. They have been educated. They understand how trusts work. They understand how asset protection works. Most of us normal people and most of us children of immigrants have never been taught this. We don't understand how a trust can provide something called asset protection, where the inheritance that I receive from my parents can be protected from lawsuits or being lost in a divorce or to creditors, or, if I accidentally rear-ended Elon Musk and he lost 20 minutes of work and sued me for $10 million, asset protection would keep a judgment from reaching my inheritance if the trust is set up in the right way to provide that. What most people are, when they get to the option of, they're given this option of how would you want your inheritance to be distributed to your kids, right? Kids under 18 can't receive money legally because they're not adults. Without a plan, they get it at 18. What parents are usually counseled with is, well, we can, and I don't know if this is your experience, but we can make it so that they only receive certain percentages at certain ages, right? 20% at 21, another 20% at 25, something like that. Well, the problem with that is if you receive 20% of your inheritance at 21 and 25, and you're going to get another payment at 30, what are you doing in between payments? Are you spending the money in your head? Because that's what we do when we know we're getting, say, a Christmas bonus. We know when we're getting our tax return. When you're getting your tax return, what are you doing? You're spending the tax return in your head because you're going to receive it. So, and I don't think parents realize sometimes, they haven't been given their wealth on paper and told, now divide this into 2 and write this check out to your child at 21. Now take 20% of that 50%, write that out to your child. How much is that number? Do you want a 21-year-old? Do you want a 25-year-old? A 30-year-old? Do you want them with a blank check for that amount versus an asset protection type trust where the funds are held in trust for them? They're given money to, for health, education, maintenance, support, and the parents determine the guidelines. For example, no new cars. Don't buy a new Tesla with your inheritance. Don't buy a Maserati. If you'd like to start a business, submit a business plan, and the trust will match dollar for dollar up to a certain percentage of the principal. In that way, you're encouraging them to invest the money wisely into a business. You could put provisions in like every year they get 0.5% of the principal to go to a self-development conference. Opportunities like that don't exist when money is given as a blank check, when an inheritance is given as a blank check. And so, and then the building of the generational wealth, as families build that, they can reinvest that money into their communities, partner with nonprofits, maybe even get to a point where their family is starting a charity of their own. So
yeah,
sorry, that was very long, but
no, it was great. It was great. And I was taking some notes because I feel like there's so much there. What do you think about, like, there's some terms that we're using, legacy planning, wealth, like generational wealth, that have a whole host of associations, feelings with it. And to your point, like at the very beginning of what you just shared, that our assumption that certain types of documentation or certain types of resources are only necessary if you're sort of at a certain threshold or of a certain class, or it's something that you are hearing talked about in your life around you. And so, which obviously there's a lot of differentiation around in culture also around how transparently you talk about some of these things in public even, right? And so can you talk to me about how that plays into this, or if there are things that maybe there's somebody who's listening to this podcast and they're like, okay, I really want to have this conversation with my partner. I think we need to find a lawyer like Cecilia, but they're nervous to bring this up, or they feel like it might be dismissed because of some of those limiting beliefs or assumptions inside their home. What are some ways you would encourage folks to, because my guess is the conversation first has to start in the home before they're going to engage a partner like you. How would you encourage people to start to dip their toe into that conversation?
That's a really good question, because sometimes people come to me and they're like, how do I even have this conversation with, say, my aging parents to get their estate planning done? And, that's a whole other thing, where I don't really want to answer that, but I want to go back to your question and not lose that thread. So let me just quickly, for people who have aging parents, because there are a lot out there, the way you start this conversation is actually weirdly to get your own estate planning done first. Because if you approach a parent and say you need to get your estate plan done, they see you as a child. So you do your own estate planning, you step into your adulthood and you say, hey, I've gotten this taken care of. I think you should too. And then it's a whole different framework for that conversation. So, but going back to when you're talking to your partner, I'm just of the belief that everyone needs to empower themselves with all this information. When I talk to people, I will usually give the gift of my mentor's book so that they can read through it. And I'll send you a link after this podcast as well. But it's a really easy book to get through because it's written in a choose your own adventure kind of format where it's, here's the story of 3 families. Here's what happens with and without estate planning. Or here's what happens with, a documents only type plan versus a more comprehensive legacy plan. So, just getting educated. And I'm trying to do that through my social media, through blog articles, through workshops. And I know a lot of my colleagues in the Personal Family Lawyer Network are also reaching out to their communities and educating their communities, because it's so important, because that is where it starts. This is not something that we're taught in high school. In my workshops or in my meetings, sometimes I give the examples of celebrity planning gone wrong. We see it all the time in the news. And people are always like, wow, but they had millions and millions of dollars. Why didn't they have a good estate plan? And the answer to that is because they were just normal people like you and I. They weren't born into wealth. Most celebrities were not born into wealth. They accumulated their wealth in their career. So they're just like the average person, getting their standard estate plans. Whitney Houston, she had a huge estate when she passed away, and the terms of her trust were very common. 20% at 21 or 25% 21. Well, she had so much money that 25% to her 21-year-old daughter was far too much money for her. And it was actually dangerous, if you remember what happened to her daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, money and is just tied to so many things. And so, of course, it's like, as you're talking, it's like, of course, this is an equity issue. Of course, this whole conversation around, both the protection of assets, the passing down of assets, the legacy of assets into partnerships with nonprofits, community. Like, there's so many layers here that are so important that are never discussed. I mean, in typical, legacy giving trainings that I've gone to or anything like that. Can I ask one other question? I know we're almost out of time, but I'm curious from the nonprofit standpoint, who might be, my guess is that actually there's a lot of equity issues and bias issues around who they're having legacy conversations with in their donor base. Do you have any suggestions for how they should be thinking about and talking to and inviting community members to participate in legacy giving to their nonprofit? And things they should be watching out for and careful of to ensure that they're approaching that side of things from an equity lens as well?
Well, one of the things that and I'm not just trying to plug my personal family lawyer network, but I think it is of value to partner with someone who is a personal family lawyer to get, that perspective on legacy and build a partnership where, and I've had conversations with some nonprofits, and I do this, and I know some of the other attorneys in my network do this, where we'll do a workshop for the donors, talk about legacy, and then invite them to do a legacy planning session with a discount rate or something. And then, we're not trying to, of course, we're not going to tell them where to give their money, but having a conversation about legacy versus what a lot of nonprofits do is maybe they'll send people to a Make Your Will platform or something like that, where there's like one question that says, would you like to, give to a charity? And then they'll put whatever. And we're not sure what they put. Sometimes they might put, $10,000 for a program that doesn't exist. But if you're partnering with an attorney who understands and who's supporting you, then that attorney knows, because they've had conversations with you about maybe there is an endowment that they prefer legacy gifts to be given. Maybe they hate endowments. Maybe, but they can kind of say, hey, this nonprofit actually prefers to receive legacy gifts this way, and it can help in that sense. And also just the whole process of it being more about legacy than just filling out documents. There's so much behind that. Like, I work with clients and I ask them, are you regularly giving to a nonprofit? Well, if you're ever in an accident, those gifts will stop unless we put it in your trust. Is there a provision in your trust that says, in the event of incapacity, you want to prioritize the continuation of your charitable giving gifts? And then also, part of my process and part of what other PFLs do is we include a legacy interview in all of our plans. We just get on the phone or get on a Zoom call, or we meet them in person, and we just record a 1-hour video conversation about their lives. And I've had it where people will come back after that video and say, oh, that was such a great experience. It made me remember XYZ organization, and I want to give them a gift. Or talking about my experiences in childhood because of this program, I want to increase that gift we talked about. So it's just a whole different frame of mind when it is legacy and not just a box that's being checked, not a blank you're filling in or something like that.
I think there's actually a few things there that I might just double click on really quickly. One is like that piece around, oftentimes I think legacy conversations only happen with what nonprofits consider quote unquote major donors, which the term has.
Yes. Okay. That's what I felt like I was missing something. So, along the lines of partnering with a PFL, another thing that I do, offer to nonprofits is I will do like a guardian nomination workshop with the community so that families in the community that they are also serving can get the benefit of getting this information about how to protect children. And then, maybe leaving that workshop with a standalone guardian nomination. And then they can start thinking about that and getting educated about that, and there are a lot of average people who you don't know what they really have. They might have $4 million in life insurance. And that's not evident because they're not that high level donor, but you find it's by building those relationships with people and talking about legacy and then having them, and I think that's the value of partnering with an attorney who is heart-centered and who cares about legacy, is that they will have these conversations with an attorney who is going to spend more than just 20 minutes with them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to pause and just ask everybody where they should go to learn more about you, to connect with you. The resources that you're offering and the insight that you've offered here, I think is giving everyone a lot to think about and is just a great framing for people to be enhancing the way they think about legacy giving and estate planning and all of that. So where can folks go to connect with you?
Okay, well, I guess my link tree is the best place to go because it's got everything, and it's https://linktr.ee/AMOLAW. So
okay, we'll make sure that that folks have that link below as well.
And then, they can find all my social media platforms there and my website. But if there's anyone out there who wants to connect with an attorney who is part of the Personal Family Lawyer Network, it's really easy, personalfamilylawyer.com. And everyone on that who is part of that, they're the best people I know, honestly. And there's this thing like when I get this comment sometimes that I don't seem like a typical lawyer or I don't seem like an attorney. And for me, that's like the biggest compliment. And that's how I feel about all of them. Like they're not like the attorney that you see, they're not like on TV or, the stereotypical arrogant attorney. They're really good people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I'm so grateful for your insight, your wisdom, and for coming on here and sharing it with everybody. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share all this valuable information. I'm so passionate and I talk about this stuff all the time. And I think it's just so important for our communities to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.